121. Woo. This was exhilarating. I might chase this feeling, Alexia exclaimed. You already do, you battle maniac, Michael scoffed at her breathlessly as he knelt on the floor, exhausted. Alexia completely ignored him and flashed a grin at Lily. I have to admit, I'm impressed, Sugar. Your power really saved us there. At one point during the fight, Subject Alpha unleashed an unusual attack, spinning around like a hurricane with all its tentacles outstretched. None of them expected it, and if they had been hit, they would have suffered more than just broken bones. Thankfully, Lily warned them in time, allowing them to avoid the attack. The beast lost its footing for a moment after that attack, and the momentum of the battle shifted in their favor. Ah, thank you, Lily said, panting slightly, her sweat-slicked face flushed. But can you stop calling me that? Nope, Alexia giggled, cutting her off before she could finish. Lily narrowed her eyes, ready to say something else, but Kong suddenly stood up. Everyone's attention snapped to him. He was looking at his phone, scrolling through something. After a moment, he said in the flattest tone possible, you guys are going to want to see this. He turned his phone screen toward them, and after briefly reading through what he had to show, Michael's breath hitched, and the color drained from his face. Even Lily looked horrified. The only exception was Alexia, who didn't show any change in her expression. Because she couldn't see, she gave them all a deadpan look and muttered, So, is anyone going to tell me what the bad news is? You know, since I can't read and all. As if her voice shook Michael from his stupor, he swallowed hard and murmured, It's Samael. He has reported some data suggesting the Overlord was indeed working with the High Priest, who also had a laboratory like this beneath his church. Alexia's expression hardened. So, that means he too has a spirit beast army, just like the Overlord. And all of it is unleashed in the city now, Michael finished. Samael was right. For a few moments, the chamber was filled with silence. Then, as if realizing something, Michael resolutely shook his head. Now wasn't the time to dwell on regrets. Now was the time to act. He stood up with a bit of a strained effort and looked at his team. Let's go, everyone. The fight isn't over yet. We need to head out and assist the authorities in combating the rampaging spirit beasts. Kong, I want you to notify the academy. Kong shook his head. Samael has already done that. Okay, that's good, Michael nodded, relief flashing in his eyes. Instructor Celine should already be on her way with reinforcements. We have to hold out and save as many citizens as we can until then. Lily exhaled sharply, wiping the sweat from her brow. I don't think first missions are supposed to be this hard. Michael didn't disagree. Their objective had been to gather intelligence and report back to the academy, but somehow they were caught in a conspiracy that they needed to uncover to reveal the truth. Then they had to fight two absurdly intelligent and strong minor spirit beasts, and now they were going to try to save people in a city being destroyed by an army of more infant and minor beasts. No, really, they had barely survived this battle, and now they needed to head into a war zone. This was truly turning out to be one hell of a first mission. Alexia stretched her arms over her head, rolling her shoulders as she picked herself up. Well, standing around won't do us any good. Let's go. For once, her usual teasing tone was absent. Michael shot her a glance and noticed there was no hesitation in her posture, no fear in her stance. From the little time he had spent with Alexia, he could tell that while she might joke a lot, she was just as reliable as any of them when things got serious. In fact, he could definitely trust his back to her in a life-or-death battle. Maybe his first impression of her had been a bit wrong. All right, he said, let's move. Kong tucked his phone away and asked, do we have a plan of approach? Judging by all the empty holding tubes and cells in this laboratory, the Overlord Spirit Beast army must have been large. If the High Priest's army is just as big, more than half the city might already be in ruins. Plus, we're not in the best condition ourselves. Michael gave him a scrutinizing look. Initially, Kong had suffered several gashes and bleeding wounds. But when the battle's momentum shifted in their favor, he took a step back and stopped fighting for a while. By the time the battle ended, all his injuries had healed except for a dislocated shoulder, which was also slowly healing on its own and popping back into place. Michael's bruises and wounds were gradually healing as well since he had copied Kang's origin card earlier. However, their regeneration could only mend flesh wounds. It couldn't cure exhaustion or restore stamina. Also, it was draining their essence. And all of them were already running low on it, especially Kong and Michael, as their essence was being used for passive healing. Michael sighed. We'll assist with evacuation efforts first. We should avoid fighting for as long as possible and focus solely on helping the civilians. We can engage in fights only to buy time for people to evacuate, not to kill. Lily and Alexia nodded. Kong shrugged like he was not so sure about this plan but didn't have any better idea to suggest. Without further discussion, Michael turned around and headed out of the bunker through the tunnel. All the other exit routes were blocked by the Overlord, so they could only escape this place through the two tunnels from which subjects Alpha and Omega had entered. Everyone followed behind Michael. The tunnel was large and spacious, with metal pipes running along its length. After walking for about 10 minutes, they finally reached the exit, a massive steel grate that had been torn apart, most likely by the beasts. Michael climbed up and through the grate, exiting onto a street and feeling the cool night air on his face. Except the air wasn't cool. It was hot. Every building around him was burning: houses, shops, apartments. Some buildings had already collapsed into smoldering piles of rubble. The street was littered with corpses, and the air was thick with the stench of blood and spilled innards. All he could hear was the distant sound of loud sirens and emergency announcements cackling through the public speakers. And all around him, people screamed as they ran from the monsters, some tripping and falling in panic, others pushing each other to get ahead. It was chaos. His teammates gathered behind him and shuddered upon seeing the state of Ishtara City. Michael let out a stiff breath. Then he saw an old woman lying in the middle of the road. Her leg was trapped beneath a fallen steel pole. An abomination was slowly creeping toward her. She was screaming, crying, begging for help. But no one stopped. After all, everyone was too busy running for their own lives. Michael gripped his sword tighter and moved without hesitation, sprinting toward her. Alexia and Lily spotted someone else who needed their help and rushed off. Kong darted in another direction to assist a group of fleeing civilians. It was a long night. A night of terror. They saved as many as people they could. But it wasn't enough. It was never enough. For every person they saved, 2 more kept dying in front of their eyes, no matter how hard they fought. And no matter how much they tried, they couldn't save everyone. 30 minutes passed in grueling agony. Everyone was reaching their limits. Lily was fighting alongside Veteran Awakened. Alexia was fighting alone, and Kong was mainly focusing on getting people to safety. But it was Michael who had tried the most, fought the most, and unsurprisingly, suffered the most. His sword had broken long ago. Now, he was using his bare hands to kill every abomination he could and save as many civilians. He had already dismissed his origin card since his essence reserve was nearly empty. Right now, he was facing 2 abominations alone to protect a small family trapped in their wrecked car. One of the abominations lunged forward. Michael dodged by jumping up high, but a tentacle lashed out and struck him in midair. He raised his guard just in time to block, but the force still sent him crashing down. He hit the pavement hard but rolled with the impact to dodge another tentacle. Then he sprang to his feet, just in time to see an abomination lunging at him again, jaws wide, ready to swallow him whole. His eyes widened in surprise, but he reacted instantly. His hands shot out and grabbed the creature's mouth before it could snap shut around him. It took a lot of effort to hold the monster back. But he only had 2 hands. And the beast had too many limbs. So, when a tentacle slammed into his ribs, he was unable to block it. The force behind that brutal blow flung him to the side. He crashed onto the ground and rolled to a halt. Groaning in pain, he then forced himself up. But this time, when he tried to stand, he faltered. Pain shot through his side, and he realized that his ribs were more damaged than he initially thought, causing him to lose his footing and fall back to his knees. And in that moment, the abomination pounced. Michael tensed. His instincts screamed at him to move, but his body wouldn't listen. His legs wouldn't obey. Too slow. He was too slow. And just when he thought he was going to die, a miracle happened. The night sky brightened. At first, it was subtle, like the stars had doubled in number. Then, those new stars began to move. They began to grow in size. Suddenly, it got so bright that it felt like daytime. It was only then Michael realized, those stars weren't moving or growing. No, they were drawing closer. Those stars were falling. Streaks of incandescent white light tore through the sky like meteors, growing larger with each passing second. Then, all at once, the heavens descended. Pillars of light crashed down upon the city, obliterating the spirit beasts in their wake. The abomination that had been mere inches from Michael's throat disintegrated in an instant, its monstrous form swallowed by the blinding radiance. All around the city, even more beasts met the same fate and were reduced to nothing but ashes by the pillars of light. And from those light pillars, figures emerged. They were people clad in the Academy's combat uniform, their expressions grim and resolute. The second-year cadets. The reinforcements from the Academy had arrived. The cadets hit the battlefield like a storm, sweeping in to help civilians and engaging the remaining spirit beasts with ruthless efficiency. The pillars of light slowly faded, retreating back into the void from which they came. Explore more adventures at my virtual library empire. Darkness returned to the sky. But now, the tide had shifted. And with that, Michael and his squad's mission had ended. 122. It had been more than 30 minutes since I started fighting, and there was no end to these monsters. Every time I slayed an abomination, another one took its place. Every time I saved someone, I saw someone else die. The situation was getting tougher and I was exhausted. I had already informed the Academy officials about what was going on in Icetara, so the reinforcements must be arriving any moment now. I just had to hold out until then and do my job, which was to save as many civilians as possible. And I was doing just that. A group of kids were stuck in a burning building and their parents were gathered outside when 7 abominations attacked them. Thankfully, some local awakened of the city, and a few police officers reached the site just in time. The police officers began rescuing the trapped kids, while the awakened started fighting the monsters. It was all happening right in front of my eyes, so I decided to help and charged into the fray as well. That was 5 minutes ago. Right now, I was struggling against an abomination. The abomination lunged at me directly, its gaping maw full of razor-sharp fangs. I barely managed to twist my body to the side, dodging its bite by a hair's breadth. But before I could counter, a spiked tentacle came swinging toward me. It was too fast. I managed to barely block the attack with the flat side of my greatsword, but the impact still sent me skidding backward, boots scraping against the blood-slicked pavement. My arms throbbed from the force of the blow, and I could feel my stamina slipping away. It was not good. This was my 20th life or death fight in the past half hour, and my body was starting to feel like lead. My hands were aching and my movement was becoming dull. I hadn't yet received any major wounds or bruises or broken bones, but I was starting to hit my limit. The only good thing about all this was that I still had enough essence to fully unleash the power of my origin card for a few more attacks. The abomination shrieked, its deformed body writhing unnaturally as it charged at me again. I braced myself, gripping my sword tightly. And as soon as the monster was close enough, I knelt and pressed my free palm to the ground, casting my innate power. The pavement under the beast's feet turned mushy and soft akin to quicksand, and it instantly lost its footing. Before it could recover its balance, I immediately hardened the ground under it back to concrete and rooted it in place. Now, these creatures were smart for low-level spirit beasts, but at their core, they were still monsters. It was in their instincts to kill and devour any living being they saw aside from themselves. Whereas a normal human would have switched to being defensive after getting trapped in a position, the beast kept attacking. I hadn't expected that. A piercing shriek ripped through the air. The creature thrashed violently and started flailing around its thick tentacles in a blind rage. One of those tentacles struck me across the chest, and pain exploded through my ribs as I was sent tumbling to the ground. I hit the road hard and rolled with the impact, then groaned in agony while standing up to my feet. "You stupid beast," I gritted my teeth and saw even more tentacles snapping toward me. I hopped back and landed just out of the range of its tentacles. From that safe distance, I summoned a card. In response, a fire arrow quickly blazed into existence in my hand. I took aim and whipped the arrow toward the creature. The arrow struck the beast in the eye and detonated with a fiery explosion. The beast screeched and growled in pain as all of its tentacles tried to reach me, wanting to strangle me to death, but I was just out of its reach. Smirking, I summoned another flame arrow and threw it. Then one more. Then one more. The arrows exploded one after another upon hitting the beast's skull in quick succession. And after around 5 arrows, the beast was dead, its head blasted into smithereens as its decapitated body toppled lifelessly to the ground. Then, "Hey, watch out," a voice shouted from the side. Suddenly, a chill ran up my spine as I felt something behind me. I turned around on instincts, and saw a beast's maw inching closer to me at an alarming rate, about to swallow me whole. Wah! My breath caught in my throat as I tried to take a step back and raise my sword. But there was no time. The beast was already upon me. I just couldn't react fast enough. For a second, both my lives literally started to flash before my eyes. My heart raced as the world seemed to slow down. I really felt like I was going to die. Once again, without achieving anything. Once again, full of regret. Just like that, But then, something strange happened. I felt an icy itch spread across my right forearm. It felt so cold that it burned. However, before I could register that sensation, the night sky lit up. At first, it was subtle, like the stars had grown brighter. Then the stars started moving. Only they weren't moving, they were falling, and they weren't stars, at all. A rain of incandescent light streaked down from the heavens, crashing into the city streets like divine judgment. Pillars of radiance slammed into the abominations, turning them to ash in an instant. The one that was about to kill me hardly had any time to screech before most of its grotesque body was disintegrated by the blinding light, leaving only its head to plop to the ground right before my feet. And from those glowing pillars of light, people emerged. They were clad in the Academy's combat uniform. Needless to say, they were the reinforcements. They were second-year cadets. As soon as I saw them, relief flooded through me. The effect of adrenaline in my veins subsided and crippling exhaustion returned. The strength left my body and my knees buckled as I crumpled to the ground like a lifeless blob. My gaze, however, was fixed on the beast's head. It was all that remained of the creature who was about to kill me. This thing was going to end my life. This weak, mindless, pathetic creature almost took me out. Ha! I exhaled, then suddenly flinched as I felt a hand on my shoulder. Swiftly turning my head around, I saw a tall young man standing beside me. He had tan skin, sharp features, and curly black hair. Dressed in the Academy's uniform, he was slightly bent over, his hand comfortingly placed on my shoulder. "Hey, don't worry, it's me, a fellow human," he reassured with a weak smile after unintentionally surprising me. "Sorry for sneaking up on you, but you're Samael Theosbane, the first-year ace, right?" It took me a moment to understand what he had said because aside from the fact that I was shocked, he also had a thick accent. Finally, I nodded awkwardly. "Hi, I'm the ace of second years. My name is Arav Caldwell," he introduced amicably. "Are you okay?" I lingered for a moment before nodding again. "Ah, yeah, I'm fine." His smile brightened. "Good. The medical team will arrive in another few minutes. Sit tight until then and relax," he said while straightening up. All of a sudden, he summoned 2 cards. A pristine white armor materialized around his body and a shiny red spear appeared in his hand from a rain of swirling light particles. His face was covered by the visor of his helmet as he turned around and faced the city. All around us, the second-year cadets had already scattered, engaging the remaining abominations with practiced efficiency. Unlike the chaotic brawls I had endured for the past half hour, their combat was methodical, precise strikes, coordinated movements, and overwhelming power. "You did good," he said, his voice muffled by his helmet. "Now leave everything to us." He then spun his spear once and stepped forward. The moment his foot touched the ground, he vanished. No, not vanished, he moved so fast that my eyes barely kept up. In the blink of an eye, he reappeared above a towering abomination, his spear wreathed in crackling crimson light. With a brutal thrust, he drove the weapon straight into the monster's skull. Boom! The air trembled as the tip of the spear erupted with explosive force, sending a shockwave that shattered the creature's head into a mist of blood and bone. Its body crumpled lifelessly to the pavement. Even in my exhausted state, I couldn't help but stare in awe. That guy was so cool. I looked up at the sky as the pillars of light from which the second-year cadets had emerged began to fade into nothingness. Soon, the night sky was dark again. I couldn't help but sigh in awe once again, this time not at any second year but at Celine Valkrin. Yes, it was her power that teleported so many cadets here in a flash. She eradicated more than half of the spirit beasts in the city with surgical accuracy, and that wasn't even an attack. That woman was also so cool. Too bad she was secretly standing against humanity. 123. 1 hour. In just one more hour, the second-year cadets had wiped out every remaining spirit beasts they could find. Their power was admirable. They were just a year older than most of the first years, but the strength they possessed put them on an entirely different level than us. Many of them didn't even use their origin cards and easily breezed through the battle. Find exclusive stories on my virtual library empire. In a way, their overwhelming strength made sense. You see, one could only raise their soul rank by absorbing essence. The more essence one absorbs, the faster one levels up. But a child couldn't start absorbing essence right after awakening their origin card. No, the soul isn't strong enough to contain all the excessive supernatural energy at that point. If one tries to absorb essence and raise their level at a young age anyway, their soul literally breaks apart and they die. Well, not die exactly. They still breathe and age, but they become hollow from the inside. Their bodies don't respond to any external stimuli and they just stay in a comatose state. A fate worse than true death. So, it's usually advised for young awakened to wait until they are 16 to 17 years of age before they start absorbing essence. That's around the same time most of them enroll in awakened academies. Then, under the guidance of instructors and professors, they learn to use their powers better and level up their soul ranks. 1 year is a long time. So, unless they are restricted by a potential cap, most of the cadets reach low B to mid-A rank by the time they enter the second year of their awakened studies. And by the time they graduate, they could theoretically achieve S rank, becoming something akin to demigods. That meant, the best of these second-year cadets were A rank hunters with plenty of life or death battle experience. No wonder they were so powerful. These infant and minor spirit beasts weren't even a threat to them. By the morning, the chaos had ended. The city was in ruins. Buildings had crumbled, streets were littered with debris and corpses, and the town square looked more like a silent graveyard. Smoke clouded the dawn sky, and the scent of blood and ash filled the air. The cries of the injured still echoed in the distance, but the worst had passed. The monsters were gone, slain by the valiant heroes. I sat on the pavement, leaning against a collapsed wall, my body heavy with exhaustion. The adrenaline had long since faded, leaving behind nothing but sore muscles and a bone-deep weariness now. The second-year cadets were moving with practiced efficiency, tending to the wounded, assisting rescue efforts, and ensuring no more threats lurked in the shadows. Camps were being set up, monster carcasses were being taken away, and survivors were slowly being gathered in safer areas. Arav, the second-year ace, stood at the center of it all, issuing commands with a steady, authoritative voice. His pristine white armor, now dulled with grime and blood, made him look almost regal. I watched as he and his squad handled everything seamlessly. They were strong, disciplined, reliable, completely different from the fools I had to work with on this mission. I mused, wondering how those guys were doing. I had sold them out to the Overlord and informed him of their attack. I didn't know how Lord Everin welcomed them, but I was sure it wasn't with pleasantries. Surely they weren't dead. They were the main characters of this story, after all. And Zaldrith wouldn't allow Michael to die right now. Lily could see the future, Alexia was strong, and as for Kong, well, I couldn't care less about him. He was a main character, sure, but his impact on the story wasn't that much. His role in the grand scheme of things was negligible. I didn't need him to defeat the Spirit King. Ah, the Spirit King. As I thought about him, my gaze drifted to the remains of the beast's head a few meters away. That thing almost killed me. And it was only a minor spirit beast. Sure, it had snuck up on me. I was fighting in a loose formation with other local awakened. The person who was supposed to be covering my back messed up, letting that creature slip past him. So, I didn't make any mistakes. It wasn't my fault. Regardless, I had almost died to that beast. To a lowly monster. I shook my head, realizing I still had a long way to go before I could even dream of standing against the ruler of all that is unholy, the Spirit King. I clenched my fists, dreading what lay ahead, when a voice snapped me out of my thoughts. You look like you're thinking too much. I glanced up and frowned upon seeing a young woman approach me. She was a brunette, with a complexion as fair as freshly fallen snow, light brown freckles across her nose, and eyes red like the color of embers. Hi, she waved before stopping in front of me. I'm Revisa, a healer on the second-year medical team. Yeah, I could have guessed that without her telling me. She was wearing a pink robe with an artistic red cross embroidered on her back, the symbol of the Healers' Society in the Academy. You're the first-year ace, right? Arav sent me to check up on you. She sat down beside me. I waved a hand dismissively. I told him I'm fine. Revisa smiled. It's still my duty to perform a thorough checkup on all combatants who took part in this battle, especially someone as important as you. I narrowed my eyes at her for a moment before grinning shamelessly as my mood lifted. Yeah, I am very special, aren't I? I scratched the back of my head, feigning modesty. Revisa laughed and summoned a card. Her eyes lit up in a bright cyan glow as she fixed her gaze on me. Though, it didn't feel like she was looking at me, but through me. Then, she nodded, more to herself. Okay, you do look fine. Just some minor scratches, small bruises, and a whole lot of exhaustion. But, you're under a lot of stress. I said nothing. Arav told me you had a close call with a monster, she continued. It must be terrifying, coming face to face with death for the first time, right? My first time facing death. Why yeah, it was scary, I said with an awkward chuckle. And definitely my first time. Of course, that was a lie. I had already died once. And today, I was vividly reminded of that death. When I saw that beast coming for me, it brought back memories of how suddenly I was killed in my past life. How that truck crushed me. Just like the beast, that truck had come out of nowhere, ramming through the convenience store walls before slamming into me. It all happened so fast that I barely had time to realize I was about to die before I did. It was a sudden, meaningless death. Even after regaining those memories in my current life, I never questioned the bizarreness of it all. Not until now. Now that I had nearly died again. Now, I couldn't help but question things, like why I had awakened my past life's memories in the first place. Why was I reborn into this world? Was this reality based on that game, or was it the other way around? And then there was that weird old man. Right before I died, that old man in the convenience store had said something to me. Something strange, something cryptic, something along the lines of, "In the place where dreams die, find the name never spoken. Only there will the heavens yield." What the fuck did that mean? And who was that old man? Was he just some lunatic spouting nonsense? Or, did it actually mean something? All of a sudden, I had too many questions. Too many uncertainties clawing at the edges of my mind. I know that feeling. Revisa's gentle voice pulled me back to the present. I almost died during my first mission too. It was terrifying. I know what you're going through. Yeah, I highly doubted that. Unless she was also a reincarnator, there was no way she knew what I was going through. But I suggest you enjoy this while you can, she added with a knowing smile. I scowled. Enjoy what? PTSD. Revisa blinked, then covered her mouth and laughed. No, I meant your days off. I gave her a blank stare. Huh, she shrugged. Yeah, you know, after a successful mission, you get a few days off, completion rewards, and some other benefits. I deadpanned. You do realize I'm my batch's ace, right? I have almost limitless funding from the academy and can skip classes whenever I want. For a second, Revisa looked completely speechless. Then she coughed into her fist as her ears turned red. Oh, right, I've never been an ace, and Arav is way too punctual to ever skip, so I just, kind of forgot aces can do whatever they want. She stood up, dusting off her robe. Okay, I should get going. You're physically fine, but it seems you've taken a mental toll. Check in with a campus psychiatrist when you get back to the academy. You second years aren't coming? I asked. She shook her head. No, we've been tasked with investigating this whole mess and maintain order in Kandara. We also need to find out how did the Overlord and the High Priest manage to control the beasts. Where did they get the resources and scientists? And how did they stockpile so many spirit beasts without anyone noticing? I stood up and gave her a sympathetic look. Wow, sounds like you guys have your work cut out for you. Yeah, but we'll be fine, she said, flashing another smile. I turned around and started walking away. I didn't think they'd be fine. The story had already veered too far from its original course. I didn't know how the Syndicate of the Nameless Lords would react to this incident. The timeline of Ishtara's destruction had escalated a lot, and now this region would never be in their control since their pawns, the High Priest and the Overlord, were off the board. One thing was certain, though, the Syndicate wouldn't stay quiet. But that wasn't my problem. For now, at least. 124. I wandered through the streets of Ishtara, twirling my new sword in hand and whistling a slow melody while checking my phone. As I expected, the news about Ishtara was spreading like wildfire around the world. In just a few days, this place would transform into a mix of tourist destination and reporters' paradise. Everyone wanted a piece of the chaos. Some sought to witness the spectacle with their own eyes, others wanted to investigate the truth, and a few, like me, would be coming here to seize opportunities. After all, both the High Priest and the Overlord were dead. While the news of their deaths, and their involvement in this incident, wasn't known yet, it wouldn't remain a secret for long. Soon, everyone would realize the power vacuum left by their absence. And many would want to seize control of this place. Because with 3 portals located in this region, Kandara was arguably one of the biggest suppliers of otherworldly herbs, mystical materials, and essence stones in the world. Of course, most of the revenue from imported goods went to the central monarch since she was the rightful ruler of the region, but those in power here also earned a good fortune. In fact, the very reason the High Priest and the Overlord committed treason by betraying the Flame Queen and siding with the Syndicate was that they felt their share of the profits wasn't enough. They believed they could make much more if Ishtara was solely under their control and they had a monopoly on all three of its portals. Fools. They were utter fools. By siding with the syndicate, they had shaken hands with the devil. They didn't even consider the consequences of their actions. They let their greed cloud their judgment, and now, because of that, they were dead. Amateurs, I shook my head. I mean, if you want to sell your soul, at least negotiate a good price first. These guys practically handed it over for free and even gift-wrapped it. And all that for what? A slightly bigger slice of the pie. An empty promise of a kingdom. Borrowed wealth and power that was never truly going to be theirs. Please, those were all such bad deals. The risk was far greater than the reward. In this world, monarchs were like gods. If you're going to betray a monarch and align yourself with a criminal empire, you'd better have an escape plan, a backup plan, and a third plan in case the first two go up in flames, preferably not along with you. I was about to roll my eyes but quickly stopped myself. One should always respect the dead, no matter how unbelievably foolish they may have been in life. As I continued to walk toward the outskirts, the streets became progressively narrower. Even though the whole city was more or less in ruins, the areas near the outskirts looked especially devastated. Since the houses here were made of scrapped tin, rusted metal, and thin sheets of wood, they hadn't stood a chance against the beasts that tore through Ishtara. Most of this part of the city was entirely flattened, everything collapsed into twisted heaps of rubble. The pavement was painted red with the blood of the citizens, gray flakes of ash fell through the sky like snow, and dead bodies, both monsters and humans alike, littered the streets. Some were mangled beyond recognition, torn apart by claws and fangs, while others lay eerily intact as if they'd simply died where they stood. The air smelled like death, thick and suffocating, mixed with the acrid sting of smoke. Not everyone was dead, however. In fact, because of how fast the Academy reacted to the situation, the death toll was significantly lower than what it should have been. Still, it was a tragedy. Most of the people who died were resin addicts who couldn't get to safety in time. I spotted some survivors as I passed. Most of them were moving aimlessly like ghosts, silent, hollow-eyed, and wrapped in layers of dust and grief. Some crouched beside the wreckage of their homes, sifting through the debris with trembling hands and searching for anything that could still be of use. Others sat motionless on the blood-stained pavement, staring blankly at nothing, too exhausted or numb to react to the devastation around them. Children clung to their parents, their faces streaked with soot and dried tears, while those who had lost everything knelt beside the bodies of their loved ones and sobbed uncontrollably. But even here, I could see the second-year cadets rushing around and helping whomever they could, their uniforms dirtied and torn already. Almost the entire second-year batch, around 500 to 600 cadets, had been deployed to Ishtara, and they all had been doing their jobs perfectly. They had put out the spreading fire and set up relief camps wherever the ground was stable. Some were distributing water and food rations to the survivors, while healers tended to the injured despite being exhausted themselves. Others worked to clear the roads, hauling aside debris and collapsed beams to carve out safe paths through the ruins. A few cadets were assigned to corpse disposal, probably the worst task of them all. They moved the bodies into piles, separating humans from monsters. Some of them dug trenches, sweat mixing with the grime on their faces as they prepared graves for those who wouldn't get a proper burial. I passed them by without a word, stepping over the blood-stained rubble, whistling that same solemn tune to myself. Soon, I crossed the city gates and left Ishtara behind. The outskirts were just as I remembered, vast, desolate, and barely a hint of vegetation anywhere. A few hours ago, after the second years secured the city, our mission had officially ended. Since our work here was done, we were called back. I'd received a message instructing me to rendezvous outside the city, right where we had been dropped off at the start of our mission. A jet would be waiting there, ready to take us back to the academy. So, that was where I was headed. Barely 5 minutes after reaching the outskirts, I spotted the jet. Sleek and black, it stood out against the barren wasteland. My teammates were already there, gathered near the aircraft, looking mentally drained and physically exhausted. Ironically, Alexia was the first to notice me. She must still have been using the passive effect of the senses enhancement card I had given her. She was talking with Kong when her head suddenly snapped in my direction, and a bright smile bloomed across her doll-like face. In a blink, she dashed toward me and invaded my personal space before I could protest. "Lord Samael," she exclaimed, wrapping herself around my arm like a cat who had decided I was its new favorite toy. "So glad you're not dead." I scowled, trying to shake her off but to no avail. Why would I be dead? She tilted her head. Well, you reported evidence of the high priest colluding with the overlord. You had to have broken into his church to do that. Then, after your report, you went offline. No one heard anything from you. We even tried to call you, but your communicator was off. She shrugged. So forgive us for assuming the high priest found you and had you killed. I resisted the urge to facepalm. My phone died. Also, I was busy helping with the evacuation and fighting an apocalyptic horde of monsters. You know, the usual. Her lips quirked. Sounds like a busy day. I narrowed my eyes at her. And what about you? I gestured toward the ruined city behind us. You seem awfully cheerful despite the fact that our first mission was a total disaster. Alexia sucked in a sharp breath. I mean, we still didn't fail. If we hadn't uncovered the truth in time, the destruction could have been much worse. I shrugged. Fair point. We did what we could. She nodded. Exactly. I just hope Mikey realizes that too. She pointed toward the distance with her chin, where Michael stood talking to Lily. Even from here, he looked far more miserable than usual. What happened to him? I asked. He said he couldn't save a little girl in time. And he almost died. Thankfully, reinforcements arrived before that. Find more chapters on my virtual library empire. I see, I murmured. Then, Alexia's hand brushed against the greatsword in my grasp, and her sightless gray eyes practically sparkled. Ooh, what's that? I glanced down at Oriath as if only now remembering I was holding it. Ah, it's just an artifact I found in a shop back in Ishtara. Oh, her eyebrows arched with interest. I nodded and started lying through my teeth. There was this old man. He asked me a question. I answered, and he was so impressed by my intelligence that he gave me this sword. She looked at me with stars in her eyes. Wow, like in those fantasy stories where the hero stumbles into a dusty old shop and gets a legendary weapon from a retired master blacksmith. So cool. What was the question? I smirked. He asked if I had money. Alexia blinked, then smacked my arm. You bought it. You made it sound like some grand trial of wisdom. I chuckled. It was wisdom. I had enough money to buy it, so I did. She huffed and crossed her arms. That doesn't count. Sure it does, I said, lazily twirling Oriath in my grip. Besides, I got it at a discount. The guy was on his deathbed and really wanted it off his hands. Her eyes narrowed. That sounds suspiciously like you robbed a dying old man. I laughed. Something like that. Alexia gasped in mock outrage, but before she could utter another word, the jet's doors slid open, and a ramp extended down to the ground before us. It was time to go home. 125. We boarded the jet and settled comfortably into our seats. No one was in the mood to talk much. Michael was sitting by the window, gazing at the horizon as the ruined city shrank behind us. His expression was unreadable but his shoulders were stiff. Lily sat silently beside him. She looked like she was searching for the words to say but found none. Kong had taken another window seat, but instead of looking out, he was blankly staring at the ceiling above. Only Alexia seemed to be in a slightly better mood as she softly hummed a catchy song to herself. But I knew that deep down, even she was disturbed by how the events unfolded. I had taken a seat at the very back, not wanting to interact with anyone right now. Your next read awaits at my virtual library empire. Inside, Celine Valkrin was waiting for us. She looked as sleepless as ever, with dark circles under her eyes marring her otherwise smooth, porcelain skin. A long black cloak was draped over her shoulders, matching the color of her dark hair. Atop her head sat a pointed hat, the kind that you'd expect to see on a witch straight out of an old storybook. The flight from Ishtara to the Ascent Isles was short, about 4 hours. Yet, it felt extremely long and tedious because Celine spent the entire time lecturing us. She reviewed our mission strategies, questioning how we could have tackled certain problems and whether there was a better way to approach the situation. According to Celine, the answers were both yes and no. The better option would have been to report back to the Academy the moment we got something against the Overlord instead of risking a confrontation with him to gather concrete evidence. However, in that scenario, the Overlord could have escaped after unleashing his beast army on the city, just as he did anyway. For some reason, he seemed to know that Michael and the others were coming to attack him. No one understood just how informed the Overlord was about the Academy's plans or how he obtained that information. Celine suggested that perhaps we were bugged. Michael vehemently disagreed, stating there was no way that could be true. This led to a heated argument, with Michael growing increasingly passionate while Celine remained calm throughout. Eventually, they arrived at the same conclusion: it didn't matter how the Overlord knew. He simply did. Of course, these poor souls had no idea that I was behind it all. Nevertheless, the outcome of their discussion remained unchanged. No matter what Michael and the others might have done, the Overlord would still have unleashed his beasts in the city. People would still have died. It was impossible to stop him since he possessed the knowledge he needed to counter us. So, what I'm trying to say is that while you might think there were countless things you could have done and hundreds of lives you could have saved, in the end, there's only one thing that truly matters: you all tried, Celine concluded. I was almost shocked. This woman was trying to lift our spirits. Granted, with her flat tone and passive face, she wasn't exactly radiating encouragement, but still, she was making an effort to make us feel good. This wasn't something I remembered from the game. Seeing this side of her caught me off guard. I guess I didn't know everything about every main character. Well, except for Michael. About him, I definitely knew everything. Celine continued, her voice smooth like silk. Without your involvement, the destruction could have been far worse. A few days from now, there was supposed to be a large festival at the town square. Thousands of people would have been gathered there. We believe the High Priest and the Overlord planned to release their beasts into the city then. That was true, but because you uncovered their plans early, you saved a lot of lives. She glanced at each one of us briefly. Right now, only about 20% of the population has suffered severe losses, according to our calculations. That's still a devastating number, but thanks to your intervention, and how quickly Samael managed to alert the Academy, more than half of the city was saved. The look on her face softened for a second. So if any of you are thinking about blaming yourselves, don't. Her voice sharpened, and she practically threw those words in Michael's direction. He flinched. Missions go sideways sometimes. Learning how to salvage a bad situation is part of your hunter training. And you all performed splendidly. Good job on completing your first mission. Some of us nodded at her words. Others, like Michael and me, didn't. For different reasons, of course. He was sulking. I was too exhausted to care about morale-boosting speeches. Michael finally spoke, his voice quieter, almost drained. Do we know what happened to the Overlord and the High Priest? Celine hesitated before nodding. Both were found dead in an underground bunker. Someone also looted the treasure vault there. We believe a third party took advantage of their fight. Michael frowned. Wait, they killed each other. I thought they were working together. Celine shrugged. It happens. Power struggles. Paranoia. Maybe one of them planned to betray the other from the start. Maybe when their plan failed, they panicked. We don't know for now. Michael leaned back in his seat, staring out the window again. Then, Celine's focus snapped toward me. Samael. I met her gaze. Yes, you reported the High Priest's collusion with Overlord Everin. To get the proof, you had to have broken into the church, right? Her tone was even, but her eyes studied me carefully. Did you make contact with him? No, I said smoothly, shaking my head. I had no contact with the High Priest because I didn't break into his church. A frown formed on Celine's face. Everyone else on the plane was surprised too. Michael turned to me first. Then how did you get the proof of their collusion? I didn't hesitate to lie. I met the High Priest's informant. I offered him asylum in exchange for the documents proving the High Priest's involvement. Celine's frown deepened. And he just agreed to that. I shrugged. I told him my identity and handed him a shit ton of money. I let the words hang for a second before smirking. Then I went back on my word. Betrayed him. And before he could do anything about it, the beasts started rampaging through the city. Celine narrowed her eyes. Suspicion flickered across her face, but she didn't say anything. She didn't fully buy my lie. Of course she didn't. She knew the High Priest was working for the Syndicate. They already had more money than they knew what to do with. So why would his informant sell him out for whatever pocket change I had? And was he really stupid enough to think I could grant him asylum? I didn't have that authority. He should have known that, but she, and everyone else, couldn't prove otherwise. Because my goal wasn't to make her believe my lie. It was to craft a flawless story, one without any loose ends for her to poke through. Besides, there was only one person alive who had witnessed me personally kill the High Priest, his own informant. In fact, he was there when I monologued my entire plan to the High Priest. Now, if he tried to expose me to the authorities or even to the Central Monarch, no one would believe him for two reasons. Firstly, because he was a criminal involved in a Holocaust. And secondly, because according to my story, he was a traitor who had tried to sell out his master, only to get double-crossed by me. If he tried to expose me now, he'd just look like a bitter idiot trying to get revenge. It was his word against mine. And I had already discredited his claims. Right then, a sharp voice yanked me out of my thoughts. You gave him your identity. Michael practically exploded. Are you insane, Samael? That was beyond reckless. I waved a hand dismissively. It's fine. It worked out in the end, didn't it? Michael opened his mouth to argue, then froze. The outrage on his face slowly melted into something resembling reluctant acceptance. He exhaled through his nose and nodded, more to himself than to me. Yeah, I guess you're right, he muttered, his voice barely above a whisper. Because of that, you were able to call for reinforcements in time. I raised an eyebrow. Wait, did that guy, the self-righteous protagonist, just agree with me? No way. This day had been full of surprises. Michael turned away, staring out the window again, looking clearly done with life. Meanwhile, Celine clasped her hands behind her back. In any case, she said, I want a debrief report from all of you by the end of tomorrow. On my desk. Alexia's head snapped up. Wait, in your office? Tomorrow. Celine arched a brow. Yes, why? Will you be busy? As a matter of fact, yes. Alexia jabbed a finger at the floor. I'll be extremely busy, sleeping. Same, I said, shooting a hand up. I haven't slept in days, and my bed and I have some serious catching up to do. Also, your office is way too far from my dorm. In fact, Alexia continued without missing a beat, I don't even know where your office is. Celine exhaled slowly, rubbing her temples like she was re-evaluating all her life choices. You two have until tomorrow to get me that report. If not, I will personally visit your dorms and make you regret surviving this mission. As she spoke, the jet's lights continued to dim ominously until only her silhouette was bathed in an eerie glow. A suffocating pressure filled the cabin, making the air feel 10 times heavier. Understood, she thundered. Alexia and I straightened so fast our spines nearly snapped. Yes, ma'am, we barked in perfect unison. Celine nodded in satisfaction before returning to her seat. Instantly, the pressure vanished as if it had never been there. God, she was terrifying. Maybe I'd just send Juliana with the report. 126. Ah, home sweet home. I exclaimed joyfully, barely standing upright as I used my new sword like a walking stick. Yes, I was using the divine sword, a treasure that millions of people all around the world would kill to get their hands on, as a walking stick. Sue me. We had finally arrived at our destination, the Ascent Isles. As soon as the plane landed, we disembarked, stretching and sighing in relief at having reached home safely. Celine was still on the jet as it was being towed to the parking area. I glanced around the runway. It was empty, not a plane or a person in sight aside from us. I frowned in dissatisfaction. Now, why the hell didn't my shadow come to pick me up? Alexia, who had exited after me and was passing by, paused at my remark and turned to face me. Why do you need her to pick you up? You don't even have any luggage. Still, it's her duty, I retorted. Alexia tilted her head. Does she even know you're coming back today? I paused. No, but she should sense it in her heart. If she wanted to, she would. Alexia continued to stare at me, or at least in my general direction, for a few long seconds before nodding. Understandable. Have a great day. On those words, she walked away, followed closely by her own shadow, Kong, who shot me a sharp glance before continuing on. What was that guy's problem? Well, I already knew the answer. In the game, Kong was one of the smartest characters. I wouldn't be surprised if he had already put 2 and 2 together and figured out that it was me who sold them out to the Overlord. His deductive skills were insane. He was like a slightly dumber version of Sherlock Holmes. But even with all that intelligence, he was the least impactful main character in the game. Why? Because he only ever reacted to the plot. He never made his own moves to push the story forward. His sole purpose was to serve Alexia. Her safety above all else was his priority. So, even though his intelligence rivaled some of the greatest schemers in the game, he never used it. He was too selfless, a true slave to his master. What a sad existence, living only to serve someone else. Juliana would have hated a person like that. She valued freedom above everything else, and the very idea of servitude was anathema to her. She hated slavery, but most importantly, she despised slaves who willingly served. To her, that blind devotion to someone else was the ultimate sin against oneself. And that was also why I couldn't care less about Kong. He wouldn't come after me as long as I didn't put Alexia in another life or death situation. ... And, even if he did, it was not like he could do anything to me. Besides, his role in the story was negligible. He might be smart, but he had no ambition. No motivation other than to be useful to Alexia. He was of no use to me. I had people far smarter, more driven, and much stronger than him who I could use in the future. He wasn't worthy of being my pawn. Well, time to go home, I sighed and started walking. From the corner of my eye, I saw Michael and Lily standing a few feet away, talking in low voices. As I walked by, Lily subtly pointed toward me with her chin, and Michael turned to face me. "Samael," he called out. I stopped and turned, frowning slightly. "Yeah, what?" Lily silently walked away, leaving us alone. Michael looked like he was trying to find the right words. His mouth opened and closed a few times as if he couldn't quite decide on what to say. I tapped my foot impatiently. "Dude, do you have something to say? Because if not, I'd really love to go home and hug my bed like a long-lost lover as I sleep on it." Michael blinked, clearly caught off guard. "That's weirdly poetic." I shrugged. "Sleep and I have an intimate relationship. Now, what is it?" He awkwardly scratched the back of his head, avoiding eye contact. Then he started stammering like a fool who had forgotten how to frame a proper sentence. I see, can I talk to you?" I gave him a look that practically screamed, "Are you serious?" And shot back, "Yeah, why the hell else would you stop me here?" "Alright," he groaned nervously and stepped closer. But as he did, his eyes naturally drifted down to the shiny golden sword in my hand that I was using like a cane to walk properly. He frowned. "What's that sword?" I glanced down. "Ah, this old thing. I got it from an old man on his deathbed. Made him a good offer, and he took it." "I see," Michael muttered, but his frown deepened. Even though he answered me, he seemed completely fixated on the sword. "You okay?" I asked. At the sound of my voice, he snapped out of it and slowly shook his head. A solemn expression settled on his face. "No, I'm not." I paused, eyeing him for a second before sighing. "Look, man, Alexia told me you couldn't save a girl. It's really not that big of a deal. You can't save everyone on these missions. Even Instructor Celine said the same thing." Michael shook his head again, this time slower, like he was trying to convince himself of something. "It's not just that girl. It's everyone else too." I furrowed my brow. "What do you mean?" He met my gaze, looking genuinely troubled. "I made a mistake. I should have listened to you and investigated the high priest. You were right about him, and I was wrong to ignore it." I watched as guilt settled deep into his expression, but he pushed on. "It wasn't even a bad suggestion to investigate him. I only turned it down because it came from you. I let my bitter feelings for you cloud my judgment, and because of that, because of my mistake, so many people, so many innocent lives were lost because I refused to act when I should have." For a moment, I was genuinely impressed. This was why I liked Michael in the game. He was a complex person with realistic and human flaws. He was a mess, naive, impulsive, and not always thinking things through. He held onto grudges and let his emotions dictate his decisions. But he was also someone who could own up to his mistakes, reflect on them, and change for the better. He didn't care who the other person was. If he was in the wrong against them, he wasn't afraid to take accountability. Take this incident for example. He hated me, Samael Kaiser Theosbane, because me and my friends had made his life a living hell in school. He hated me because I used my power to dominate other people and not help them like any good awakened should. Yet here he was, apologizing for not listening to me when I was right. This wasn't something you saw every day. It was rare, and this quality, along with many others, was what made him one of my favorite playable characters. In my previous life, I used to want to be like him. Someone strong and reliable, just and kind, but petty and resentful when needed, and, most importantly, someone who admitted his faults and worked to be a better man. He was actually a nice guy. So, I guess what I'm trying to say is, Michael inhaled sharply, squared his shoulders, and dipped his head slightly. "I'm sorry. I messed up." I studied him for a second, then nodded indifferently. "Sure." He snapped his eyes up as a frown creased his forehead. "Huh, that's it. You aren't going to rub it in my face or make any smug remarks. No insults, no gloating, nothing." I wrinkled my nose in disgust. "Why do you sound almost disappointed? Do you want me to humiliate you? What are you, a masochist?" "No, I just," he groaned, raking a hand through his hair. "So, we're good. We can start fresh." I nodded again. Yeah, sure, you screwed up, I forgive you. It happens. And I'm nothing if not a gracious and understanding person. Michael let out a long breath, tension bleeding out of his shoulders. But before he could say anything else, I slipped a hand into my robe and pulled out 3 faintly glowing essence stones from its inner pocket. His eyes widened as soon as he saw them. In fact, I said, tossing the glowing jewels toward him, here's a token of my goodwill. Michael fumbled to catch them, nearly dropping one in his scramble. He stared at the shimmering stones in his hands, and his expression was torn between disbelief and something akin to fear. Are these? His voice trembled. Are these essence stones? 127. Are these essence stones? Michael blurted out. His voice was a mix between shock and something dangerously close to panic. His fingers trembled around the precious gems, like he was holding a live explosive rather than a fortune. And he didn't even thank me. Talk about being ungrateful. Tisk. Yes, I answered, my tone almost bored. His wide eyes snapped back to me, disbelief plastered across his face. Where did you get these? A slow, twisted grin crept onto my lips. I sighed dramatically before letting out a chuckle laced with dark amusement. Well, if you must know, I stole them. Michael visibly recoiled. Quote. Stole them. His voice cracked. From where? The high priest's treasure vault, I said like it was the most normal thing in the world. His jaw dropped so hard that it practically hit the floor. I could have laughed, but I wasn't done yet. You see, the third party that Instructor Celine mentioned. The one who took advantage of the chaos and looted the high priest's vault. I gestured to myself with a flourish. That was me. I followed him back to his bunker, watched him fight the overlord and kill him, then swooped in to kill him myself and take everything worth stealing from his treasure room. I casually pointed down at my dark robe and golden sword. In fact, these are also from his vault. Michael swayed. It looked like he might actually pass out. But instead of falling unconscious, he shot forward and grabbed my collar in a fit of rage. Are you insane? He barked. Any card or artifact found during a mission is property of the Academy. Keeping them for yourself is stealing. And what you've taken is so valuable it could be considered grand theft. My grin widened. That's correct. So, what are you going to do about it? Michael stared at me like I belonged in a mental institution. I'll make you report your finds to the Academy. If you surrender everything now, they might still forgive you. I hummed, tapping my chin like pretending to consider it. Then I flashed him a warm smile. No, I don't think I will. He blinked. What the fuck is wrong with you? His voice pitched higher. We were on this mission together, you bastard. If they find out you stole during the operation, they won't just punish you, they'll punish us all too. I gave him an approving nod like he was a dim-witted child who had finally solved a difficult puzzle. Exactly. So, he nearly shouted. Do it. Report your finds. I mused. Nah, I'm good. Michael's expression contorted with anger. With a sharp breath, he let go of my collar, gritted his teeth, and turned on his heel. Fine, I'll report you myself. But before he could even take a single step, I shook my head. No, you will do no such thing. He froze in his tracks. Quote. What? I smirked. Because if you do, I'll submit my own report stating that you were in on it. That this whole thing was your idea. His head snapped toward me, disbelief flickering across his face. Bullshit. That's a lie. Oh, is it? Well, sue me. I placed a hand over my chest mockingly. But seriously think about it, Michael. You were the one in command during this mission, weren't you? One of your teammates sneaks off, kills the high priest, and loots his treasure room, and you had no idea. That's impossible. His throat bobbed as he swallowed. My version of the story is far more plausible. And even if it isn't, I leaned in slightly, lowering my voice, it creates reasonable doubt. Enough to drag you down with me. Michael looked like he wanted to punch me. I could see it in the way he clenched his fists so tight that his knuckles turned white. But before he could spit out another protest, I continued speaking. Discover hidden tales at my virtual library empire. The punishment for stealing from the Academy is immediate expulsion. But they wouldn't do that to me. I'm first year's ace. It would be bad for their image. I let that sink in before resuming. Alexia is a high noble. She has no political standing, but even the Academy wouldn't charge her with grand theft without expecting retaliation from her father, a duke. That leaves Lily and you. Lily might also get off easy because of her coveted ability. But you, Michael visibly shuddered. There's nothing special about you. My voice turned softer, almost pitying. You're strong, sure. You have an exceptionally useful origin card. But at the end of the day, you're just a commoner. No connections. No protection. I watched as my words sank into his bones and weighed him down with the realization. While the academy might only limit our promotions, make it difficult for us to advance in ranks, and strip away my title of ace under some fabricated excuse, I laughed. They would make an example out of you. Michael gritted his teeth, barely restraining himself from taking a swing at me. They would expel you without hesitation. I cocked my head. So tell me, Michael Godswill, are you really ready to throw your life away? He lingered for a moment, then hissed, Why? Why are you doing this? I extended you a hand of friendship, but instead of taking it, you do this. What do you want? I sighed. As I said, he really was a nice guy. He believed in things like fairness, justice, and doing the right thing. And that only made him easier to exploit. Because the world wasn't built on ideals, it was built on power, leverage, and the simple fact that the strong made the rules. And right now, he had no leverage. I almost felt bad for him. Almost. Truly, I wished there was another way to get what I wanted, but I needed his essence circulation technique, and I needed it now. It was going to be essential for my next plan. Maybe I could have played the long game. I could have shaken his hand, pretended to be his friend, and built trust with him before asking for his technique. But that wouldn't have worked. And even if it did, it would have taken too much time. Especially with a demon whispering in his ear. Time, however, was the one thing I didn't have. If I was right, Juliana must have already made her move by now. I needed to crush her. Decisively. So, blackmailing the protagonist for his cheat was the only option left for me. I let out a quiet chuckle. What do I want? That's easy. Remember a few weeks ago we were supposed to make a deal. You were going to tell me the secret of your strength, and in return, I was going to give you this card. I summoned a card from my soul arsenal, Visual Link. It was the same card that Alexia received as a reward for ranking in the top 10 during the evaluation exam. Michael had wanted this card. He tried to make a trade with Alexia, but I got to it from her first. The card had a single function, one that was both simple and unique. It allowed the user to see through the eyes of a willing ally. Michael needed a card like that so he could see through Zaldrith's eyes and learn a special sword art, one that required seeing the flow of essence in the atmosphere. Unfortunately for him, a card like Visual Link was extremely rare to come by at our level. So the moment he saw me summon the card, he stiffened. I thought you said you'd break it. Well, I didn't. I smiled. The deal's still on the table. In fact, I'll even sweeten it. I have 2,000 essence stones. I only need 400 to 500 to level up. I'm willing to give you 1,000. I snapped my fingers as if recalling something important. Oh, and last time, you said you'd never make a deal with someone like me. So, this time, I'm not giving you a choice. If you refuse, I'll do as I said and report my grand theft to the Cadet Council president, framing you as my accomplice. This time, Michael couldn't hold back. He snapped. With a snarl, he swung his fist at my face with blurring speed. But I was already moving to evade the blow since I anticipated something like that. I jumped a few steps back, quickly dismissed Visual Link and raised my sword just enough to react swiftly in case he decided to come at me. Calm down, Michael, I warned. But Michael wasn't interested in warnings. You greedy motherfucker. He spat as he got ready to cast an attack card. Just when I thought you finally changed. Just when I thought maybe I judged you wrong, you go ahead and prove you're the same selfish, conniving bastard you've always been. I said, calm the fuck down. I lost the subtle smile on my face and yelled out sharply, cutting him off. For once, he actually hesitated. You said you couldn't save that little girl, I continued, my tone razor-edged. You almost died yourself. Do you think you're the only one? I almost died too, and I wish I could have saved more people than I did too. But I couldn't, because I was weak, and the same applies to you. Michael's glare wavered, though his voice was still full of rage when he shouted, What? You said you made a mistake by not listening to me during the mission. I shook my head. That wasn't your only mistake. You were also weak. Michael's eyes widened, and I finally saw a flicker of doubt, of reluctant recognition, in his gaze. His expression softened just a fraction, but he still looked ready to rip my head off. I pressed on. If you were stronger, you could have saved more. No, maybe you could have prevented that incident altogether. I know I could have. I let a short stretch of silence wash over us, broken only by the faint whisper of the morning breeze. Michael's breath caught in his throat. He looked like he wanted to argue, to call me a liar and a manipulator. But he couldn't, because deep down, he knew I was right. I lowered my sword. That's why you need to get stronger. So next time, there won't be any regrets. I tapped my temple, and believe it or not, it's the same for me. He shook his head, searching for something to say, something to throw back at me. But nothing came to him except denial. No, you, what? I scoffed. You think I'm not just as frustrated about how everything went down? Why? Because in your head, you've made me into some kind of villain. Because I've done bad things, I can't possibly be the good guy. A dry chuckle left my lips. The world isn't so black and white, you fool. No one's a villain in their own story. Michael's hands trembled at his sides. His rage twisted into frustration, then into something else, something resembling despair. I exhaled slowly. So here's the deal. You give me your secret. In exchange, I give you the visual link card and 1,000 essence stones. That way, you'll be one step closer to the strength you want. You don't have to like me, and I sure as hell don't need your friendship. But this deal benefits us both. His jaw clenched as he helplessly looked down. If you refuse, I said, keeping my voice cool, you're useless to us both. And I don't tolerate useless fools. You have until tomorrow to decide. Or else, well, you know what happens to people who stay weak. They get trampled. With that, I walked past him, leaving him alone with his thoughts. 128. After giving Michael a friendly warning, I made my way to a pawn shop near the airport that was only accessible to the top 10 cadets of every batch. There, I purchased an appraisal card and a small vial of healing potion, both of which cost me a fortune. Or, well, they would have. But I paid the bill using the golden badge, a privilege reserved for aces, granting me a 100% price reduction on any purchase, up to a certain limit. Then I made my way home to Alarin Street. I felt utterly exhausted. My eyes burned, and my eyelids felt as if they were made of lead. I was barely staying awake, overwhelmed by the irresistible urge to collapse onto my bed and sleep as if there were no tomorrow. But before I could finally rest, there was just one more important thing I needed to do: bind the divine sword to my soul. Yes, I had yet to do that. Oriath was still not bound to me, which meant I couldn't use any of its enchantments. Sure, I had no reason to rush. I could have waited until tomorrow to bind Oriath after getting a good night's rest. But truth be told, I could hardly wait any longer. So, I decided to do it today. As soon as possible, in fact. Therefore, the moment I reached home, I slipped out of my new robe and tossed it aside. Then I took off my other clothes as well. The binding process was going to be messy, and while I was still wearing a threadbare tunic and a cheap trouser I bought in Ishtara, I didn't want to ruin my clothes. So, after stripping down to my underwear, I sighed and moved toward my bathroom. My dorm room, if it could even be called that, was a duplex-style luxury penthouse on the highest floor of my building. There was a plunge pool on the balcony outside. For a second, I thought about doing the binding process there instead of in the bathroom, but then I changed my mind. I was going to be out cold for a while after the process. I didn't know how long it was going to be, so doing it outside would be a risk. Hence, I climbed the stairs leading up to my bedroom on the second floor and entered the attached bathroom there. Without wasting a second, I got inside the bathtub and comfortably laid down inside it. I held the divine sword in front of my body and watched as its golden blade gleamed under the dim light, a beautiful pattern of intricate runes engraved on its polished surface. I took a deep breath. The process of binding Oriath wasn't complicated, but it wasn't something to be taken lightly either. A soul-bound artifact was exactly that, an extension of one's very soul. The moment I completed the ritual, Oriath would become inseparable from me, its power forever intertwined with my existence. I equipped the appraisal card in my soul arsenal and immediately summoned it. I focused on the sword before me, and as soon as the card activated, a string of glowing letters appeared in the air over it. Enjoy new chapters from my virtual library empire. The letters displaying the item's status were only visible to me, and they read: Name, Oriath, the Divine Blade. Rank, undefined, soulbound artifact. Type, armament. Item, artifact. Description, a weapon worthy of legends, not forged by gods but by mortal hands. Oriath shines with a golden brilliance that rivals the divine. Those courageous enough to wield it gain the strength to challenge the heavens themselves. Enchantment. 1. Final gambit. When the wielder faces mortal peril, Oriath's power surges exponentially, turning the tide of battle in their favor. The closer to death, the greater its lethality. 2. Trinity Oriath can seamlessly shift between 3 forms: an Executioner Greatsword, twin single-edged longswords, and a regal bow. 3. Celestial Furnace converts the wielder's raw essence into pure light energy, fueling devastating attacks imbued with divine brilliance. 4. Conduit While held, Oriath subtly enhances the wielder's essence absorption, accelerating recovery and strengthening their reserves. Maker's Inscription. This is my life's work. A blade not forged by gods, but destined to surpass them one day. Let it carve legends in its wake and be a testament to the boundless potential of humankind. I swallowed. This was it. That last part. Those were supposed to be the words of the sword's creator. Not much was known about him, even in the game, except that he was a genius artificer captured by the Syndicate and was forced to work for them. Every item's status screen followed the same format because of how the appraisal card worked. It read the engraved enchantments on an object, deciphered their function, and translated it into a human language for the user to understand. Few artificers or forge masters could create enchantments that were capable of altering the appraised description so smoothly. The fact that Oriath's creator had managed to do so was a feat in and of itself. Truly, he was a genius. Anyway, time to resume the process. Taking a deep breath, I held the small vial of healing potion in my right hand and pressed my left wrist against the sharp blade. The cold steel bit into my skin and a stinging pain shot up my arm. I could feel it almost immediately. My cephalic vein was severed. It was terrifying to see how freely my blood flowed from the slit wrist, but before even a drop could fall into the bathtub, Oriath absorbed it all like water into a sponge. The sword drank deep. A pulse of heat surged through my arm. Then came the chill. An unbearable, bone-deep chill. It was so cold. All of a sudden, mind-numbing fatigue washed over me. I was already tired, so now it took everything I had just to stay awake. 4 minutes. For 4 long minutes, the sword continued to drain my blood. I couldn't take it anymore. I began closing my eyes. Just for a second, just a quick wink. But then, a wave of otherworldly power flooded through my veins and my eyes snapped open. The first thing I noticed was that the engraved runes on Oriath's surface were now burning bright with a brilliant golden glow. At the same time, a strange sensation stirred deep inside me, and I felt an unmistakable connection to the sword. It was an odd feeling, being linked to an object, but I pushed that aside. Right now, I had more pressing matters. I quickly uncorked the vial with my teeth and poured the healing potion over my wrist. The liquid hissed as it seeped into my wound, and right before my eyes, the deep gash slowly but surely began to close. Almost instantly, the power surging through my veins vanished, leaving behind nothing but overwhelming weakness. My legs shook as I gasped for air. Pushing the sword aside, I used the bathtub's edge to support myself as I stood up. Ha, I panted, barely holding myself upright. That was dangerous. Just as my body was about to give out, the binding process was completed. And in that instant, the sword's final gambit enchantment activated, granting me a sudden rush of tyrannical power. That was dangerous, yes, but also so cool. I laughed, then turned my attention to the golden sword lying in my bathtub. Without a second thought, I extended my hand, focusing on my connection to Oriath. It was deep in my soul, I could feel it. It came as natural to me as breathing, like it had always been a part of me. I tugged on that connection. The runes on Oriath's surface flared, glowing even brighter. The sword hummed softly before trembling on its own. And then, it lifted. Oriath rose from the bathtub, floating in the air. In the span of a heartbeat, it shot toward me at a speed incomprehensible to the human eye. Before I could so much as blink, it was in my grasp. I gazed at my outstretched hand, fingers wrapped around the dark hilt of the golden blade, and felt a twisted smile creep onto my face. Then, I laughed hysterically. Oriath pulsed in my grip, resonating with my very soul. It was mine now. With this, one of the tasks I needed to complete in the first arc of the story was done. Now, all that was left was to crush Juliana, and hope she wouldn't be stupid enough to defy me. I then had to kill Rexard Cronwall, the concoctor. Hopefully, I should be able to achieve both those objectives at once. 2 birds with 1 stone. Oh, and of course, before any of that, I still needed to take Michael's essence circulation technique, because without it, I wouldn't stand a chance against Rexard Cronwall. A lot of work still lay ahead. But today, I was one step closer to my goal. And tomorrow, I would be one more. 129. After binding Oriath to myself, I ate a sandwich to recover some of my strength, drank some good scotch, and collapsed onto my bed. I couldn't even remember when my eyes closed and sleep overtook me, but it did, and I welcomed it with open arms. I was so exhausted that I couldn't recall what I dreamt after falling asleep, not that I usually remember my dreams anyway. But what I did remember was the infuriating frustration I felt when a sharp ringing sound jolted me awake from my much-needed slumber. Ding, ding, it was my doorbell. I ignored it for the first few times and flung my arms over my face, trying to block the incessant noise. But by the fourth ring, my patience snapped. I groaned and peeled the blanket off my body with the grace of a dying man. Whoever was at the door clearly had no regard for my suffering. Ding, ding, the fifth ring. I swore under my breath, dragging myself out of bed. My body protested every movement as I climbed down the stairs and reached for the door while considering all the ways I could make the intruder regret their persistence. With a deep sigh, I yanked the door open. What? Standing in front of me was a short young man with neatly combed back dark brown hair. His glasses were so large they covered more than half his face, giving him an owl-like appearance. His thin frame trembled at the sound of my raised voice when I shouted at him in annoyance. It's me," he said meekly. I gave the young man a long scrutinizing look. Then, with a confused frown, "Right, who are you?" The boy's eyes snapped to me, his expression twisting in surprise as he looked almost offended. "It's me," I scowled. "Yeah, you said that already. Ivan," he exclaimed. I studied him again as he practically shook under my gaze like a leaf in a storm before clapping my hands in faux realization. "Oh, right, Savan, it's Eva." Ivan sighed in utter exasperation from having to deal with me and tried to correct me on his name. But before he could finish, his expression shifted all of a sudden. His eyes widened as if he was properly seeing me for the first time today. Then, he shrieked, "Why are you naked?" I glanced down. I was in my underwear, which was stained with some dried blood along the sides. I shrugged. "I'm not." "Well, you might as well be." Ivan yelped, his face turning beet red as he looked away, flustered. I winced. "Shish, don't shout. My head is aching." His expression softened almost instantly. Oh, my bad. Sorry." Turning around, I walked back inside, leaving the door open. Ivan hesitated at the threshold, shifting from foot to foot before reluctantly stepping in and shutting the door behind him. I've been trying to contact you ever since I heard you guys returned from your mission," he said as I led him into the sitting area. Then, as if remembering his manners, he quickly added, "Congratulations on making it back safely, by the way." "Oh, sure, thanks." I waved off the sentiment and gestured for him to sit. "Discover hidden tales at my virtual library empire." He complied, perching awkwardly on the edge of the chair. I took the seat across from him on the sofa, crossing one leg over the other and leaning back casually. "Now," I said, leveling him with a look. "What's so urgent that you had to disturb my rest? Or was it just to congratulate me?" Ivan fidgeted, adjusting his glasses as if that would somehow make this conversation easier. "Well, it's about your shadow, Juliana. You asked me to keep an eye on her." I raised an eyebrow. "Yeah." He swallowed hard, then took a deep breath before continuing, "Well, for the 10 days that you have been, she and our alchemy instructor, Rexard Cronwall, had gotten somewhat close." I stared at him. Then, slowly, I leaned forward, resting my elbows on my knees. "Somewhat." Ivan hesitated before improving his word choice. "Very. They've gotten very close. Rumors are flying about them among the first years about all sorts of things. But no one dares to say anything aloud since he's an instructor and she's a cadet." I drummed my fingers against my knee. "Close how?" Ivan adjusted his glasses again, looking clearly unsettled. "They're spending a lot of time together. Late nights in the alchemy lab, too many private lessons, even leaving the academy grounds together a few times." My fingers stopped drumming. I didn't say anything, and for a moment, the silence stretched, thick and heavy. Ivan shifted anxiously in his seat. I finally exhaled through my nose. "And why, exactly, are you telling me this like it's a warning?" Ivan licked his lips. "Because you asked me to report anything suspicious I find about her to you. And, also because I think she's using him." That got my attention. "Explain." He frowned as if trying to find the right words. "I mean, that girl. She's charming in a way that's hard to explain, but she doesn't just get close to people for no reason. Every relationship she cultivates serves a purpose." He paused before adding, "After observing her these past few weeks, I can tell that every single time she talks to someone is because she wants something from them. And it doesn't matter if they realize that, because after a while, they become more than willing to be of service to her in any way they can. It's Ivan visibly shuddered. It's almost disturbing how she strips people of their will and manipulates them like her mindless puppets. I finished for him. Ivan looked at me and nodded, sweat forming on his brow. Yes. And she does it so subtly, without anyone noticing. Even I was able to see it because I was actively paying attention to her. Well, Trivan, color me surprised. I smirked, genuinely pleased with him. You are highly observant for an NPC. An NPC. Ivan blinked, his frown deepening. Never mind, I waved it off. Good job, though, but before I could praise him further, his eyes narrowed on me. You're not surprised? He asked, before lingering for a few seconds. Wait, you already anticipated a scenario like this. That's why you asked me to keep an eye on her. You didn't want to know what she was doing, but when? The smirk on my face grew until it turned into a grin. A full, wide, toothy grin. Then, I laughed, and your deductive reasoning is good too. I'm actually impressed now, but Ivan was paying little attention to my words. He looked so confused that I worried his brain might shut down. Why, what is going on between you two? I stood up, my grin still firmly in place. Remember what I told you when we first met? Ivan froze, searching his memory. Then, as if finally recalling it, he spoke in a subdued tone. Tita never asked you about your business. I let out an amused hum. Oh, look at that. You have a nice memory too. Ivan's lips parted slightly like he wanted to press further but didn't have the courage. But although he dropped the matter like I wanted, he looked so pitiful that I couldn't help but sigh. Running a hand through my hair, I decided to throw him a bone. If you must know, Sisson. It's Ivan, he corrected, sounding more defeated than usual. Ignoring him, I continued, Juliana is playing a game. She's used to playing alone, where everyone is just a pawn. She moves however she pleases. And because she plays alone, she always wins. But not this time. This time, she'll lose. Quote. Wait, Ivan raised his hands as if to physically catch whatever nonsense I was spouting. She's manipulating someone, and you're just letting her. Because you two are playing some twisted game. I furrowed my brows, genuinely puzzled. Letting her? No, I'm not letting her do anything. I'm making her. His face scrunched up in confusion. You think I'm the one playing against her? I scoffed. Please, I'm just flipping the board. Ivan opened his mouth, closed it, then tried again. Finally, after a long while, he stammered, I don't understand a word you just said except that you two might possibly need professional help. I laughed. It's as they say, to a fish, flying is madness. To a bird, drowning is foolishness. I stepped closer, peering down at him. But back to you, Vivian. I asked you for something. Do you have it? Ivan blinked at me, still processing the existential crisis. I'd just shoved into his brain. Why yeah, I have it. He fumbled inside his coat, clearly still fighting the urge to question my entire philosophy on life, but wisely choosing not to. After some awkward shuffling, he pulled out a small glass container and handed it to me. I took it without hesitation and started inspecting it. It was about the size of 2 test tubes, filled with a thick, red liquid that looked dangerously close to blood. It was fake blood. Good boy, I cooed, smirking as he scowled. I placed the container on a shelf, then shot him a sidelong glance. With this, you've completed all 3 tasks I asked of you. You've held up your end of the deal. I'll start working on mine in a week. What's the name of your little crush again? Ivan's ears turned red as he muttered, it's Irina. This guy, I had so much work to do on him before he was even remotely boyfriend material. Right, Irina, I'll help you win her over like I promised. I nodded, then sighed tiredly. By the way, you could have at least waited a full day after I returned before showing up to my doorstep and reporting all this. Ivan just looked at me. I stared back. What? I asked. He tilted his head slightly. Samael, I did wait a full day. You guys got back yesterday. I blinked. Then, very slowly, I turned to look at the window. Bright afternoon sun, clear blue sky. Wait, but I fell asleep in the afternoon. Oh, fuck, what's the day today? I asked carefully. Thursday, Ivan replied flatly. Oh, fuck, I cursed. I'd slept for an entire day. What? He asked. I gulped a mouthful of saliva and chuckled nervously. I have to submit a debrief report to Instructor Celine about our mission. Ivan shrugged. Want me to help? I'm good with numbers and reports, and I write really fast. I can have it done by tomorrow evening. I shook my head. It's due by the end of today. Silence. Complete silence. We stared at each other quietly. Then, without a word, Ivan slowly rose to his feet. Well, I should go, he said. Wait. I lunged for him, but he was already bolting for the door. Ivan, wait, but the bastard didn't wait. He dashed through the door at full speed, leaving me alone with my impending doom of a report I needed to write. 130. Young master, are you serious? You called me here for this? Yes. Juliana stood before me, looking caught somewhere between disbelief and exasperation. She was dressed in the standard academy uniform. A copper hexagonal badge was pinned to her chest, embossed with the Ouroboros symbol. Her neck-length white hair was styled in a wavy bob with bangs, framing sharp azure eyes that were currently glaring at me. We were in my living room. After my conversation with Ivan, I had spent 6 grueling hours compiling my mission report. It wasn't exactly perfect, so I already knew Celine would have plenty of issues with it, especially with how I explained my reasoning during the mission. But I was too exhausted to care. So, after finishing the damn thing, I did what any rational slave-owning master would do. I summoned my shadow and asked her to deliver it for me. Juliana stared at me like I had just told her to jump off the island. You called me here urgently from the academy, just to make me deliver your debrief report to Instructor Celine's office. I nodded as if this was the most natural request in the world. She pinched the bridge of her nose and exhaled like dealing with me was physically painful to her. Young master, Instructor Celine's office is closer to you from here than it was for me from the academy. I nodded again. She continued glaring but didn't say anything immediately. For a moment, I thought she might let it go. Then, when it became clear she couldn't, she finally asked, "And why are you naked?" I glanced down as if just remembering I was still in my underwear. Oh, I felt like letting the world witness my undeniably godly physique in all its glory. Juliana visibly fought the urge to scream. Her fingers rubbed at her temple in growing frustration before she almost cried the words out, "Young master, I was really busy." Oh, yeah, I raised an eyebrow. What were you doing? Working on a project in the Alchemy Society, she answered. And the moment I uttered my next words, her expression turned to stone. With Professor Rexard. What? She asked flatly. I shrugged. I just heard some rumors flying around. Honestly, Julie, I knew you were a gold digger, but isn't that guy a little old for you? I mean, he's at least a decade older than us. She didn't react. No scowl, no glare, no comeback. Just cold silence. Her face turned passive, but I knew her too well to miss the small twitch of her eyebrow or the faint shift in her stance. Oh, that gold digger comment really struck a nerve, huh? I held her gaze for a moment longer, then laughed and shoved the file into her hands. Relax, I'm just kidding. You can do whatever you want, I don't care. But seriously, deliver my report. It's urgent. Do it before Instructor Celine leaves her office. Juliana took the file, fingers tightening around it like she was ready to use it to smack me upside the head. But she didn't. She held back. Instead, she inclined her head in a show of fake respect. As you wish, young master. With that, she turned on her heel and walked off, exiting my apartment and closing the door behind her with just a little more force than necessary. I sighed, flopping onto my couch. Initially, I had planned on sleeping after finishing the report. But now, my body was exhausted, yet my mind was too awake to rest. Must be all the coffee I drank while compiling that report. I ran a hand through my hair and exhaled. I guess I should do some work. I had achieved everything I needed to get stronger in Ishtara, a soulbound artifact and a treasure trove of essence stones. By using those stones, I could easily break through my soul rank in a few weeks. If I shattered 10 essence stones a day, and it would take me around 500 stones to accumulate enough essence for a breakthrough, I could rank up in just a month and a half, 50 days, give or take. Great, right? Well, yes, but also, absolutely not. No, it wasn't great. Because here was the problem. Normally, it would have taken me at least 7 to 8 months to achieve a breakthrough. Now, I was cutting that time down to less than half. Discover hidden content at my virtual library empire. That wasn't just fast, it was suspiciously fast. If I suddenly ranked up in only 50 days, the professors, instructors, and academy officials would start asking questions. How did I do it? Oh, I had essence stones. Where did I get so many? I bought them. Do I have purchase receipts? When did I buy them? Where did I even get the money, considering most of my personal accounts were supposed to be frozen by my family and the academy had a copy of all my transaction history whenever I used their funds on something? Too many questions. Too much hassle. I needed to avoid that kind of scrutiny. So, I had to convert these essence stones into legally acquired assets, disguise their origin, and make them indistinguishable from legitimately obtained resources. In other words, I had to launder them. Yes, it was time to commit some financial fraud. So exciting, right? Well, yes, but also, absolutely not. Because here was another problem, I wasn't smart enough in economics to pull something like that off. I mean, I knew how to money launder in theory, but I had never done it. So, aside from having no experience, I also had no connections. And you absolutely do need connections if you wish to launder such a large amount of wealth. I tapped my chin thoughtfully a few times, then shrugged to myself. I guess it's time I pay him a visit. Vince cleverly. It was finally time to meet him. But first, I should take a bath. And put some damn clothes on. This feels so good. Spreading my arms wide, I breathed in the fresh evening air, letting the soft wind brush against my face and tousle my golden blonde hair. So good, I chimed blissfully, earning a few odd looks from passing cadets. Not that I cared. What did those fools know? Most cadets here had never even set foot outside the safe zones, let alone in a place like Ishtara, one of the many war-ravaged lands where law and order and hygiene were as mythical as dragons. They took fresh air and clean streets for granted. They had no idea how good they had it. Honestly, neither had I until a few weeks ago. Here on Ascent Isles, or anywhere in the western or central continent really, the standard of living was leagues above the conquered territories situated outside the 5 established safe zones. And I wasn't even exaggerating. I could physically feel the difference in air quality after coming back from Ishtara. The pollution here was nearly non-existent, and the streets weren't drowning in filth. It was almost surreal, like stepping into a dream where everything was just clean. But more than that, the world inside the safe zones simply felt safer. Beyond the barriers of the safe zones, away from the monarch's protection, the very fabric of reality seemed thinner, like it could rip apart at any moment. Even now, I could still feel the phantom weight of Ishtara's suffocating air clinging to my lungs. The stench of rot and too many unwashed bodies packed together. The ever-present haze of dust and ash choking the streets. Just thinking about all that made my stomach lurch in disgust. I rolled my shoulders, shaking off the memories. Honestly, that filthy city had probably given me more PTSD than the massacre I'd witnessed there. But never mind that, I was back now. Here, the air smelled of fresh rain and blooming flora. Even the distant scent of roasted meat and baked bread drifting from the nearby bakeries and restaurants felt so indulgent. Truly, this is civilization. I sighed theatrically, placing a hand over my heart with a flourish worthy of the stage. It was 7:30 in the evening. The sun had just set, painting the sky in a deep shade of darkness and letting the city drown in the soft glow of the street lamps. Since the Ascent Isles floated so high in the sky, we experienced sunrise earlier and sunset later than the people on the surface. The panoramic view of the sea of clouds beyond the edge of the main island was also as breathtaking as ever. Yeah, I really missed this place. Alright, enough reminiscing. It was time to move. Dressed in a black satin shirt, matching pants, and my dark gray robe draped over my shoulders, I hummed an upbeat melody and started walking. But after barely 5 steps, I abruptly stopped in my tracks when I realized I had left my communicator back in my bedroom. You see, the Academy City was massive, and I had the memory of a goldfish. Navigating the streets without getting lost was a challenge far beyond my abilities. So, I needed maps to get where I was going. Clicking my tongue in annoyance, I turned back. I hadn't gone far, so I was back within a minute. And that's when I saw him, Michael Godswill. In a plain white tee and dark ripped jeans, the black-haired protagonist was heading toward my dorm building when his eyes landed on me. Samael, he called out, immediately making his way in my direction. I paused, looked around, and did what any sane person would do. I ignored him and kept walking. Hey, Samael, Michael shouted after me, weaving through the light evening crowd. Samael, stop, but I didn't stop. However, much to my dismay, he caught up just as I entered my dorm complex. He matched my pace and began walking beside me. Samael, he yelled again, right in my ear this time. Oh, Michael, I turned to him, feigning surprise. Hey, long time no see, how are you? Michael gave me a flat look. Really, are you actually pretending you didn't hear me? What? I waved him off. What are you talking about, my man? I would never ignore you. PFF'd. Even as I said it, I quickened my pace. Michael kept up with me. I made a turn. He was still beside me. I exhaled sharply. Okay, why are you following me? I want to talk to you, he replied. And weren't you the one who told me to give you an answer today? Right, I did. But the fact that he was here in person instead of just texting me meant that he actually had something to say to me. And truthfully, I really didn't have the energy to deal with him right now. Michael, I just finished writing a lengthy report for Celine, and I don't have the mental capacity to. Damn, before I could finish speaking, I turned the corner toward the elevators and bumped straight into someone. Oh, sorry, I started to apologize, but then I saw who it was. My twin sister, Talia, and surrounding her were her two childhood friends, Princess Alice and Prince Willem.